Today we're going to be building a chimenea. My wife had found a picture of one on the internet and we're going to put it down by the outdoor bar. Now, starting a project with a picture off the internet, you kind of got to guess at your height, your width, and the size of what you're going to be building. So for this one, we're going to go about 48 inches tall, right around 28 inches wide. First thing I did already was cut 2 of the sides and I cut the bottom. I need to cut one more side, so I'm going to use one of the sides that I cut already as a template and then lay it on top of this sheet here, make my marks, and then we'll go ahead and get that cut out. So we have our marks made on the sheet that we need to cut out. The next thing I'm going to do is take this piece of angle iron and line it up along the marks. I did check, for one little tip to get your right distance from a straight edge to where you need to cut. I measured from the center of the tip here to the outside of this guide, and it's about 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to take that and run it 5/8 of an inch off my line on each end and then clamp it down. Now throughout these videos, you'll see me using clamps, cut-off wheels, flap wheels, and other accessories that Hobart does offer. You can find those on hobartwelds.com and then purchase them at your local Hobart retailer. Always read and follow all labels and the owner's manual. So now that we have our third side cut, I'm going to remove the clamps and the angle iron that I use as a straight edge, and we'll flip the piece over, clean the joss up, and I do that. I typically use just a small ball peen hammer and we'll knock it on the side, and then I'll go back with the flap wheel and make the edge really nice. So we have all the pieces cut. As you can see, I did make some lines on this one for the opening for the wood to go into the chimenea. Came down here to a point and back. I went a little bit over 2/3 of the way down, like I had mentioned earlier. But again, I'm building this based off of a picture, so I went back and looked at the picture and it seemed like it was a little farther back. But what I did for this one was the bottom of the opening is up about 3 inches. And then from this corner, I'm up about 20.5 inches for the top of the opening. And the depth is right around 22 3/4 deep to here. Now you can change that for yours. That's just kind of what I'm guessing off the picture that I saw. So we have the 2 sides cut with the openings in. As you can see, there's some joss left on here and that, so I'm going to go ahead and clean both of these up, and then after that we'll move on to the next step. The next step is to build the grate that's going to go on top to bottom. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I cut this bottom out. A couple things I wanted to go over is that I did make this out of 3/16 inch material versus 1/8 inch for the sides. And then the size of the bottom, corner to corner, it looks like I have about 28 3/4 of an inch, which should match up pretty close to the bottom of those larger triangles. Now to make the grate, what I want to do is I'm going to take this 1/2 inch round bar and I'm going to put stay about 1.5 inches maybe from the side is what I'm thinking. And about every 2 to 3 inches, I'm going to just keep cutting bars and having them come across here. Once I get all my bars across, then I'm going to take a few of these longer ones and lay them across and tack weld them just to hold everything together. There'll probably be 3 of them on here to hold the whole grate together. When it's done, it's going to be about 1 inch height, being that this is 1/2 inch round bar. I figure that'll give me a little bit of airflow underneath. If not, maybe I'll drill some holes somewhere, I don't know, but I'm thinking 1 inch will be pretty good for airflow underneath there. So as you can see, I've got all those bars cut, and then I cut 3 of them to lay on top for now and have them tack welded. I'm going to be using the Hobart Multi-Handler 200 and finish welding these together, and then this will actually be flipped upside down from where it is now when it goes into the fire pit. Okay, that should do it. Now when this is actually in the chimenea, this will be laying like this. That should keep the wood about 1 inch off. So like I mentioned before, get some decent airflow. The next step from here is we're going to take the bottom and get that set up. We're going to actually get down on the floor because I'm going to start taking two sides and putting them together. And if I do that up here, it's going to be up above my head. I'm too short for that. So we're going to move the table, get down on the floor, and continue working. So our next step to the project is going to be to tack weld pretty much the entire bottom and the sides together. Where it's at, just get a couple quick tack welds. Our sides are tack welded, so we'll change the settings on our machine, and then I'm going to crawl inside and do a few tack welds on that bottom. Go up to 3/16, so it'll be at 20.8 and 420. So the sides are all tack welded together. As I mentioned, I'm going to cut this top before off before putting it back on the table. So I kind of just made a triangle shape on a little bit of an angle just to give it a dimensional look, so it's not just flat on top. So as you can see, let me turn this here. It kind of gives the opening just a little bit of a dimension versus just cutting it flat off. I think it looks a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead, clean this up with the flap wheel, make that look a little better, and then we'll get it up on the table and continue on with the project. The next step is to weld the bottom on and then weld the seams up. So I'm going to start welding the bottom maybe about every 5 inches or so. I'll put a stitch weld, and then I'll come back and do the seam. As I mentioned earlier, the bottom is 3/16 of an inch thick versus the sides are an 1/8 inch thick. So I'm going to set my machine for the thicker material, the 3/16, and then I'll concentrate a little heavier on that with the weld pool and wash it into that 1/8 inch. Okay, so now I'm going to change the setting on my welder to I think 14 gauge will be nice for this outside corner. So we just finished up welding the bottom on, welded all the seams up, and the next thing I'd like to do is build the legs for it. I've seen a couple of these where they had a solid bottom, maybe about 3 inches thick. I think I'm just going to do 3 different legs. That way I could get some airflow underneath here. I don't really know if that's needed or not. Just in my head, that's what I'm thinking. I'd like to get some airflow underneath there so you don't have all that heat on the surface of whatever you set this on. So we're going to head over to the saw. I have 2 legs cut, and I believe these are, yes, 3 1/4 inches. Okay, so now that we have that complete, the last thing I'd like to do to these legs is I want to put a little cap on them. I'm just going to measure the inside of the leg as we mentioned, and it's 1 inch and 13/16. So we'll take that, transfer it to the plate. Sometimes you'll cut them, you're a little off and they're too small so they want to fall in. I guess even if they're not, I like to take a small magnet that'll fit up on the inside, and I push that up to the top. Get my piece square on there, and then bring it back down right even with the top. That way, if it is too small, you don't have to hold it. Even if it is big enough to sit on there, you don't have to sit and hold it with one hand and tack with the other. You got both hands free. You can line everything up really nice and get a good weld on there. So we're going to go ahead, weld these 3 on, and after that, we'll weld the legs to the bottom of the chimenea. So we have all the caps welded on the feet here. While I was welding, one of them had a little bit of a gap, so I had to turn the machine down one material thickness so that I could finish the weld without burning through. When I was done, I took my flap wheel and I rounded off all the edges nice and flat, took the weld off of the end here so it doesn't rock, and I think they turned out pretty good. So the last step is to weld these to the bottom of the chimenea. Now what I'm going to do is use a magnet to hold them in place, and I decided that I'm just going to take the point of each leg, because there's three, one for each corner, and I'm going to aim that right to the point of the chimenea. So that wraps up the chimenea project. You know, it was a little bit difficult here and there trying to figure out some of the things that, you know, when you're building something based off of a picture from the internet, there's always something you might change. Now on this one here, I think if I did it again, I would probably take this 3-inch measurement and maybe change it to 4 to have a little bit deeper of an ash pan. But other than that, I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. Another thing you could do to personalize it is maybe cut a design in these two side panels. So when you're viewing it from the front, whether it be your favorite baseball team logo, football team, maybe a flower, butterfly, something. Then when you're sitting in front viewing it, you're gonna see the glow of that right through there. Now I built this one for me, and hopefully you'll take yours and personalize it and enjoy it in your own backyard.